Hey guys, welcome to another tutorial by your boy JRB. Today we're going to be looking at how to make realistic renders using Eevee. For the most part, we're going to be looking at the settings for Eevee. For the rest of it, we're going to be looking at two different scenes that I worked on and kind of using cycles as reference, little tips and tricks here and there. And to be fair, today's Sunday, tomorrow's Monday, I have to post this tomorrow. I didn't prepare that much ahead of time, so if I do miss a couple things in terms of realistic rendering in Eevee, let me know in the comments. I'll probably make another video at some point, but for now, it's fine. I'll try to make it as informative as possible though. Let's just jump into the video. I am going to move locations because it's early and I need to get myself going. One of the first settings here is ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion is going to help you out quite a bit in fixing some of your renders. It's just going to create some contact shadows for the most part. To be fair, I don't understand ambient occlusion. I think it's like if two things are like touching, it kind of makes a more realistic shadow. Turn it on. That's all you need to know. And adjust the settings as they are here. Your distance is probably going to be 0.1. Trace precision is probably going to be all the way up to 1. And yeah, simple. All right, next, the setting is going to be screen space refractions, or reflections. I forget what the name of it is in my head. What you're going to want to do is turn off half space reflections, half res. I'm looking at my computer, but I cannot for the life of me see what I put. Turn on refractions and turn off the half res tracing thingy mabob and turn up your max values. So that way you get the best results out of your reflections. This is usually what I go with, so keep that in mind, son. Next thing, your shadows. Just bump these up to the highest value, which is 4096. I usually go with that for every single render. I don't have a reason not to. It doesn't affect my render times too much. I think it does, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't mess with it. Like, for the most part, try to mess around with that and see what gives you the best result. But for me, that has always given me the best result in my shadows. And for this other setting that I did here, higher performance normals, I don't know, or it's like high quality normals. I don't know if that does anything better, but it's a good word. High performance normal, it's just high quality. So that makes me feel good that I clicked that button, even though I really have no idea what it's doing. Probably click on it. These are things that I normally just click on before I even start working on a video anyways, so just kind of click them. All right, let's go on next setting. All right, then we have color management. You already know this one probably. You need to change it from filmic to standard. That's it. We all know why. Colors are better, things like that. To be fair, sometimes I even use filmic on some of my renders because I feel like the muted colors just look a little bit better and I don't have to do as much work color correcting it, because sometimes it comes out a little too vibrant on standard. Is that just me? Probably. I set up my things weird. Unless I like immediately put it on standard before I start working, I won't switch it. So if I start on filmic, I'm ending on filmic. That's pretty much how it works for me. Okay, let's talk about bloom. Bloom is something that Cycles, I don't think necessarily has as like an option, because I haven't used Cycles too much here until recently. But bloom is optional. Bloom is really good if you have a full scene with a background and everything and there's no transparency. If you plan on ever having any type of transparency in your footage, let's say you're rendering out passes for certain things, do not add it. It is not necessary whatsoever because I do a lot of my compositing in After Effects. So instead of adding bloom in Blender, especially for the multiple passes with transparency, I'll add like deep glow or some type of glow effect on my After Effects stuff. It's a little bit easier. Sometimes you get better control over it. And yeah, the only time I really use bloom is if I'm making a full scene like this. So, you know, use it if you want to. It does make things look a little bit more realistic when you have full scenes made. Again, just take into note with the transparency thing, because the main thing with that is that it cuts off your bloom and it doesn't look right when you start compositing layers to it, even if you have transparency on, like the gradients get all fucked up. I don't know how to fix that. If anybody knows how to fix that, that'd be great, because I would love to be able to use bloom in my transparency renders, but I can't because it cuts the things off. It cuts them off, man. Why does it gotta do this to us? I don't know. Anyways, next thing. Subsurface scattering. Here's the thing. It has some sample settings here. I don't know what jitter does. Don't ask me. I also never use this setting like ever, because 90% of the time I'm not using subsurface scattering. But if you are going to be using subsurface scattering, probably up the samples. It makes sense in my head that the more samples you have, the better your render is, just the slower it's going to be. So obviously take this into consideration when you're making your videos. That's it on subsurface. Again, I haven't really used it too much unless I'm doing a cycles render, because I think it looks way better in cycles. This is one of the things that I think Eevee struggles with a lot. So keep it in mind. The next thing. Now, if you have any volumetrics in your scene, clouds, explosions, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. What you're gonna want to do is you get the highest quality volumetric settings ever out of Eevee that you can possibly get, because we all know that cycles is much better for volumetrics, even though it's way slower to render. Eevee still has a hard time with volumetrics, so don't get it twisted. But the highest render settings that you can possibly get with this is you're going to want to set your tile size, I believe, to 2x. Just follow along here, 2x. Your sample count is going to be all the way up to max, which I believe is like 256. Your distribution is going to be set all the way to 1, and you're going to also turn on volumetric shadows. And you're going to turn that up all the way to, which is going to be 128. Volumetric shadows essentially is just going to allow you to add like a light source and have it have shadows like it should, because without it, you won't have any shadows. Same thing with volumetric lighting. You want lighting. This is going to be helpful for fog. If you're doing fog, like just plain old fog with no detail in like your smoke, you could probably do lower settings, like even 16, because personally you don't need that much for just a plain old fog layer. But if you're going to be doing something like an explosion, a cloud, something that has like all these like little details and noise and things like that, you're going to want to make sure your resolution thing is set to 2, and then your sample count is also pretty high. Now, there's also the distance here. That's actually very important for Eevee. I didn't showcase it here, but for the most part, the reason why you use this is because let's say there's an explosion right in front of me. You want to make your minimum distance right at the edge of that explosion and your maximum distance right at the back of that explosion, or the front, I guess. To you guys, wait, what would this be? Yeah, so front, minimum distance would be like right here, and explosion would be right here, just to encapsulate that explosion that happens to be in there. This will make sure your explosions look really good and they aren't low quality. This is an annoying thing that you have to do with Eevee. Again, I prefer cycles a lot more in this respect. But now that we're done with all the settings, let's move on to the scenes. We're gonna take a look at my Chainsaw Man edit and talk about why cycles is probably better than Eevee and what Eevee struggles with. All right, that's what we're talking about. One big thing here, you can take a look at my cycles render for the Chainsaw Man edit. The main issue that I've always came across here is if you don't have screen space reflections, you ain't getting this look here with the cans. It just won't have the reflectivity and showing what's being reflected on it. It's very annoying, but it is fake, so you're not going to get proper global illumination from this, and it does suck, but it's fine. One of the main things Eevee struggles with, and it's the biggest thing that a lot of people, it's the biggest reason people use cycles over Eevee, is that it doesn't have global illumination. Something I hope for in the future is Eevee gets like an Unreal treatment, or they get something like Lumen or Nanite to make it work better, because Lumen seems like a perfect fit for the Eevee work style, where it's fast, real time and stuff like that. Lumen happens to be real time. Even on my graphics card, which happens to be a 2070, you don't need a good graphics card for it. And that's why I like it. I prefer that type of thing. Another thing that it struggles with is you can look at these glass shards I have on the ground. They look like a single flat color in Eevee. And sometimes you kind of have to just deal with it because there's no real way to fix that unless you add extra lights into your scene. Because there's no global illumination, you have to kind of compensate some of those reflections in those bounce lights with other lights in approximating where a light's going to bounce, hit another area. It doesn't do that in Eevee, so you have to put a light in that area. It'll hit that one area, but it won't bounce. So then you have to put another light, you have to put more lights. It's so dumb. I don't like Eevee for that reason. It's kind of the main reason I wanted to switch to Cycles, because managing lights is one of the most annoying things in my life. Because in my original Cycles renders for this scene, all I had to do was add a sunlight. Actually, no, it was an area light, and that was it. Created everything I needed. The shadows were perfect. You saw the blood reflect really well onto the can. The glass shards actually look like glass shards, like you could see through them a little bit. They had like some transparency to it. Instead of just it being like this flat brown shit color, it was bad. It was bad, okay? We don't want that in our renders. It's the main reason I don't like Eevee. There's probably some other reasons, like the fact that I have to turn on ambient occlusion, because for the most part with Cycles, you can just turn on Cycles and it works. Eevee, you have to manage a bunch of settings. It's not that fun, but for the real timeness that it gives you and how kind of close it is to Cycles, you can't go wrong sometimes with using it, in my opinion. But yeah, this isn't a Cycles tutorial, so we're gonna be doing Eevee. I don't plan on doing a Cycles tutorial until a little bit later because I need to get a little bit more used to it, and then we'll go into it. I'll probably have one related to my Chainsaw Man edit, which I will have a little BTS video for the entire thing. Here's a little preview of me making a scene, time-lapse right here, but I will be having a full BTS video on how I made that, which is gonna be fun. It's a fun edit. I don't know when it's coming out, don't ask me yet, but let's move on to actually making a scene using Eevee. Alright, now let's take a look at this scene. This is a very random scene where I was actually testing out some like Google Maps / Google Earth to geometry things for the landscape as well as the background New York scape thing. For the most part, this is where we're going to put a lot of our things into motion using all of these settings and doing all of these cool little things here. One big thing I noticed is that if you're going to render an Eevee, you might as well use Cycles as your reference. You have access to Cycles. It might be slow, but it'll give you an accurate representation of what a realistic scene is going to look like. A big option is having the HDRI. You need HDRIs with Cycles or with Eevee. It's going to help you out a ton. So use an HDRI. Another thing that I noticed very well, like making this scene, is that lights like sun obviously are going to create shadows, but if you take a look at the Cycles to Eevee variation, there's this big harsh shadow on this landscape that I created here, and one of the main reasons why you're not seeing that big line of shadow is that you actually have to adjust the sun's light settings. Again, more and more settings that you have to adjust just to make Eevee look realistic. And that's changing the shadow cascade depth all the way out to however far your scene goes, so that way it knows to calculate those shadows. You notice it more when you start zooming into your scene and then you just start seeing these shadows come out of nowhere. It's like, wait, when did these get here? Because this happens to be a big scene. It happens to be like over 100,000 meters depth. It's a big thing. That was one of the main takeaways, as well as that your lights you need to really adjust. I had this issue recently on a commission that I did for a friend. that it would zoom in and these shadows came out of nowhere after you got to the end. And this was after I rendered everything, and I realized like, oh, it's just because the shadow matte is not all the way back. Another thing you're going to want to also turn on is contact shadows. I don't know much about them or how they work because a lot of times I don't see a big difference, but that is something that I've heard that you should also turn on. What else? You also can notice the screen space reflections. It's like the same thing. Not really, but you can see the same issue coming here where the ocean layer that I have doesn't reflect any of the ground. It's kind of this flat thing, and when you turn it on, it has some reflections. It reflects the environment, the lights that are coming on, all of this stuff, and you need that on if you want it to do this. It's really good for metallic materials and things like that, to be fair, but that's one of your main things you're going to want to go based off of that. Then some little things to make your renders even more realistic in Eevee. You usually have to do this in cycles anyways, but again, let's talk about fog. There are two types of fog you can do. You can do volumetric fog and you can do a mist pass. I did both in this video here, where essentially for the fog, I decided to make like a bunch of varied fog stuff. This isn't a tutorial on how to do the noisy fog thing, but you can obviously copy the settings that I'm using here with the noise texture, color ramps, and all that. Make a fog layer with some volumetric fog. It helps your scene look more realistic, and you can obviously turn up or down the values of how much fog you really have, because just a tiny amount is going to help a lot. Also, a mist pass is going to help you out a ton, because you can add this in either in the compositing layer in Blender, or you can render out a mist pass separately and put it into After Effects and use it as a blur map. A fog layer, like it's an extra layer of fog where as you go further and further back in the distance of real life things, you're going to see an atmosphere. You're going to see a little tint of blue over everything as it gets further and further out, because that's your atmosphere. That is what a mist pass does, and you can mix that in. It's very good. For the most part, that's all I can say here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else because I'm looking at my thing. Oh, on the camera settings, for your clip start and clip end, these are actually really important for Eevee. If something happens to be really far back in the distance and you have your settings on the basic style, which is 0.1 to 1000, that's like usually default settings, you might notice some like flickering in your geometry. You'll see it here, but there'll be some flickering in your geometry. To fix this, normally what you have to do is you have to set your view distance to your clip start. Okay, you need to set your clip start to 1 millimeter or 1 meter. This should fix a lot of your issues. Because I have a really big scene here, my clip end happens to be at 100,000 roughly. I had to bump it up all the way to 100 meters as the clip start. But you have to be careful, because if you start getting too close to things, it will clip. I mean, it just won't render those objects. And it almost puts it in like a box, the same as your volumetrics. So keep that in mind, obviously. I think that's it. This is how you do Eevee stuff. If you guys like this video, let me know. I'm currently working on a bigger edit right now that it's a lot more work having to use cycles, because rendering just takes a long ass time, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna be fun. It's a little bit more work than most of my other things, so we'll see how it works out. I'm trying to finish it for next month. If not, I have some other edits that I already have made that I could post instead. So hopefully I get it out in time. It's a Chainsaw Man thing. You already saw a glimpse of it here. And yeah, I mean, that's about it. I'm gonna try and keep doing these tutorials. I have to make sure I do these ahead of time, because today was way too last minute for me. Don't want to do that again. And yeah, I'm trying to think, is there anything else? I think I don't know. honestly. If you just liked it, subscribe, all that. If I missed anything, in terms of making Eevee more realistic, just let me know in the comments. Let the people who are watching this video know about the wizardry of making it realistic. All right. I probably missed a couple of things. I'm not a savant on making my renderings realistic. I happen to just know a lot of everything, but I'm not good at one thing. So just figure it out. That's all I'm saying. All right, I'm gonna go. I'm tired. I gotta eat. I haven't had breakfast yet. I had to record this, and I have to edit this. So just fucking deuces. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your day. I'll make another tutorial next week. I'll probably plan out what that's going to be tomorrow, so I don't have anything to tell you what the thing is going to be tomorrow. I mean next week. But if you're on my Instagram, follow me, because you'll get to see some behind the scenes or me progressing my Chainsaw Man edit, as well as getting updates on what tutorial is going to be next. So sometimes I just don't know when making these. Sorry for this being so long of an outro. I don't know how well I'm editing this together, but hopefully I do it somewhat justice. Yeah. Alright, peace out. Oh, you know what? I should add this. Also, sample count. You're gonna want to update your sample count all the way to, like, roughly you can keep it at like 64. It doesn't look bad. I usually just bump it up to like 512, even though it's probably not necessary, but you can do it. It's something that's just, it's there. You want to mess with your sample counts. It's just usually you don't need it too much in Eevee. I usually don't. I keep it at 64 90% of the time. It works out. All right. Anyways, hope you enjoyed. Peace, guys. I'll go edit this video and have it up for tomorrow. Peace.